Welcome to Inside Creative Minds. I'm your host, Trey Goodman. We're here at Copper Star Coffee, one of my favorite coffee shops in the Valley. Now, in today's show, we're going to meet Effie Boris, a local architect and artist, and she's going to bring those two things together for us. But first, have you ever wondered how the newscast comes together? You see the anchors and reporters, but who's actually making it happen? Well, we're going to find out today as we meet Melanie Alvarez, a local news producer. Now, Melanie Alvarez, welcome to Inside Creative Minds.
Thank you.
And we're here at Sky Cafe in Mesa. Now, you're a news producer, but I know a lot of people have no clue what a news producer does, so enlighten us on that.
Oh boy, a news producer is, I like to tell people who have no clue, they're the person in the anchor's ear when the anchor goes like this, "Excuse me, I am hearing new information about a story." But actually that producer shows up about 10 hours before the show begins and decides what goes in the show, how it's treated, who's reporting what stories get a graphic, what stories get video. They write the whole show.
Let's talk about that, the writing part. Now,
all right.
You just said write like it was simple. There's a lot to that.
There is a lot to that. It's getting all of the information needed for a story, judging what is newsworthy, what is not, trying to encapsulate an entire day-long event into 20 seconds. It's a tough thing to do. But really, when you look at it, the writing is only a small portion of everything that a news producer is in charge of. But the writing, I feel, is key. It's one of the most creative parts you can use in your producer toolbox.
So what would you say the role of the producer is in a newscast then?
The news producer in and of itself is in charge at the end of the day of the editorial content in that newscast. Sure, they have bosses, they have other people who are saying, well, shouldn't you put in this, shouldn't you put in that? But at the end of the day, a news producer says, this is my show, I decided what goes in it, and this is how I wanted it executed, and boom, here it is, 6 o'clock, and we're on the air.
So lots of decisions. Would you say it's more left-brained or right-brained?
I like to call it more of a balance. I think a lot of people would argue that it is more practical, scientific. You know, I need to convey the facts as they happen during the day, but I look at it and say, you know, you're also creating TV,
right.
And it's got to be good TV or else you don't have a viewer. So the way I look at it as a news producer is you're having a conversation about the news with your viewer, and creating a conversation that lasts a half hour or an hour every day is a pretty creative process.
Definitely. Now, our viewers are wondering where you've produced at. You were at a local station for a while, and now you're at the Walter Cronkite School, and you're one of the faculty members for the Newswatch?
Yes, I'm a faculty associate, and I've been teaching TV news producing for students there for 3 semesters, and I'm going to be the supervising producer for Newswatch, which is the student-run news program produced at ASU.
Now, is that going to be daily, 2 or 3 times a week?
We're starting out, I think, 2 times a week, and once the students get the ball rolling, it'll be 3 evenings a week, and you know, they go live at 5 by the end of the semester, which is pretty great for college students to do.
Now, whether we're at ASU or you're at one of the previous stations you worked at, who really, bottom line, who decides what news is?
Gosh, you know, I hate to say it, but really it's a bunch of people in the newsroom sitting around a table, just kind of like we're sitting around saying, well, what do you think is important today? And it's kind of scary, but you trust those people to make the decisions in what is delivered to you that day. You know, they weigh a lot of options. What's compelling? What do we have the resources to cover in the first place? What can we make a good TV story? Plus, you have the support of network feeds from CNN, your network affiliates, news that comes in from around the world, you know, via satellite. You can pick and choose what you can put on the air.
Now, you said that you start 10 hours before the cast, but let's say we're doing a 6 p.m. cast. At what point are you deciding this is what's going on the air?
As we do it. That changes. I mean, you can have a game plan at 9 a.m. to have your reporters on story X, Y, and Z,
right.
But at 3 o'clock, when, you know, the mayor comes out and holds a press conference about the latest blow up with Sheriff Joe. When, you know, goodness forbid, there's a car crash that's causing miles-long backup on the freeway, if that happens at 5 till 6, guess what? The entire top of your show blows up and you wing it.
So you really have to be on top of what's happening during the day.
During the day, you know, you mentioned decision making. I mean, there is a decision that is made like literally every minute throughout the day. If a news story comes in at 3:02, and I'm writing that up because I think it's a great story for my 6 o'clock, I have to be prepared, fully prepared to say, that's a great script that I wrote, but this is much more important, so I kick it out and it never sees the light of day.
In the business, I know you use the word teasers, where you're sort of trying to sell a story coming up. How do you see that versus entertainment versus, where's the line between what's really news and entertainment?
It's becoming more and more blurred every day, I think. The sad reality is that TV news is a business. That if we don't have viewers, there won't be a news product to begin with. So you have to cater and find a good balance to the people who are tuning in for the news. Usually give them that in A block. And then you find something a little sexy, a little kind of off the cuff. You hope that will keep somebody through a commercial break. And when you say, don't go away, because I have a lot more I want to tell you, you got to give them a good reason to stay. And it's definitely an art form to try to figure out what that is.
So you find writing the teasers is key then?
I write the teasers before I even write the story.
Wow.
Because I have to make a commitment to that story to say, okay, what is so compelling about that story that will keep me watching? And if I can write a great tease for that story, I know the story belongs in the newscast. At the story meetings at the beginning of the day, I say, okay, so we're going to go and cover the story. How do you tease it? How do you sell somebody on it? How do you convince somebody to spend the next 2 minutes of your life listening to this story? And if you don't hook them in the first 7 seconds of a story, they say the first 7 seconds.
7 seconds?
That's all you have to convince someone to keep watching that story.
Well, there's a lot of options now on TV, and people pretty trigger happy. What made you want to become a news producer?
I actually got an early start in theater. I was a theater geek. And I loved performance, and I loved the ability to connect with an audience. I thought that was great. But I was concerned about making a career out of it. So I also loved writing. I actually spent a lot of my time early on in print journalism.
Okay.
And I was editor of my college paper at USC.
So you have a very strong writing background.
I have a strong writing background, but I always majored in broadcast journalism just to get the technical expertise to know what I was getting into. So when I say writing's key, I think it really is key.
Is that what you're really pushing to the students at ASU?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. About halfway through the semester, after I've thrown all of the logistics at them, saying, okay, this is what you have to do to back time a show. This is what you have to do to make sure an OTS, a graphic, is ordered correctly. You bring it all the way back down to basics. And if you aren't writing a clear, compelling newscast, it doesn't matter how many bells and whistles you have, you aren't going to get that viewer to commit to you.
How do you see the internet affecting local news? We have the old school thought of you watch the news at 6 and 10. Anybody under 25, I don't think they don't even know that the news is on at 6 and 10,
No.
nor care.
Right.
So how do you address that?
It's tough. I think a lot of stations are finding a variety of different paths to integrate their TV product with their internet product. Because if you don't go the internet route, like some stations decided, no, we aren't going to even tackle that. You have to find the marriage. You have to say, here, I gave you 20 seconds of this story, but if you want to find out a little bit more, we put the whole database available on our website. It's almost giving people the option that if you like this story and you want to find out more, here, we've put it here where we don't have a definite in time and an out time for our broadcast. And you can watch at will. You can build your own newscast. Another good source, I think, is referring back to like big investigations that a station does. If someone clicks and says, oh, I remember Channel 5 or Channel 15 did a story on bridge collapses. Whatever happened with that? You can do the internet search.
That's very cool.
And find the story, and you don't have to always be in front of your TV the moment that show is produced.
How do you feel in the next few years? Will we still have news, you think, at 6 and 10? Or,
I think the mainstream newscasts, the early evening fringe and the late night newscast will stay just because of network affiliations. Those are the time slots that are generally available.
It almost becomes a recap.
It does become a recap, but the stations that are doing the 4 o'clock news and, an hour at noon and, for goodness sakes, 2.5 hours in the morning, there might not be a market for that anymore because people can find the news they want much faster on their own time frame on the internet.
What advice do you have for someone wanting to become a news producer?
Right.
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 Yeah.
And learn how to interact with a whole bunch of people with a bunch of different egos.
Now, by interact, you mean get along, or what?
Interact, I think you're not always going to get along with the people that you work with. If you can treat everybody cordially and professionally, great. But you have, especially in TV news, you have a very big balancing act that you have to attend to regarding the anchors that you work with, the reporters who are extremely proud of their product, the photographers who went out and shot an hour of video and you end up using 20 seconds of it. Yeah. You have to know how to relate to all these people and respect the work that they're doing, but also make them understand that this is all I have time for and this is all that's going to fit.
You seem to have a lot of passion still for the business, so are you trying to push that onto the students, pass that on to the students?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a passion for what you do, why are you doing it? I have a lot of respect for the news, and I've made a good life out of it for a decade. And I think it's something that you can really get excited about and training the next generation, because I look at them and they have so many more opportunities. Yeah. I joke around that when I started, and it was only 10, 15 years ago, that we had monochromatic screens, and we didn't have this thing called the internet to do an instant search
Google.
to find.
Now you Google anything, right?
And it's crazy. They have just so much opportunity, and if they just get into it, there's no stopping them.
So local news the next 5 or 10 years, what do you think is going to be the big thing that we're going to stand back and go, wow, oh wow?
I just think it's really got to learn how to cater to its specific audience. Local news viewership is going down. There's no secret about it. So it's got to find a way to reinvent itself and really make it worth it to the viewer to tune in every day. I don't have the answer for that, but somebody hopefully will sometime soon to keep the industry alive.
Well, Melanie, thanks so much. We're running out of time, but obviously you're going to be over at ASU,
yep.
And you guys have got a brand new program, brand new school.
Brand new school, brand new building. Yeah. Check it out. It's going to be an amazing little show we're putting together, Cronkite News Watch.
Well, we hope to check in with you down the road and see what you guys are up to.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Brought to you by SCF Arizona, the state's largest provider of workers' compensation insurance. We help Arizona workers stay safe while helping Arizona's economy by keeping insurance costs low, giving money back to businesses, and giving back to the community. SCF Arizona, at work for you.
Supporting locally owned businesses is better for the economy, builds unique communities, and preserves the environment. Find out more at localfirstaz.com. Think local, buy local, be local.
Well, welcome back to Inside Creative Minds. Now we're going to meet architect and artist Effie Borras. So Effie Borras, welcome to Inside Creative Minds.
Thank you.
And you're joining us here at the Sky Cafe in Mesa. Now you're an architect slash artist or artist slash architect?
Well, I'm both, but I wouldn't put one in front of the other. To me, architecture and art are the same thing. There's really so little distinction between them.
Now you are a trained architect. I mean, that's what you do for a living, right? Trained architect.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
I trained as an architect.
Right.
But I guess you could say that would be the academic, side of me. But there's also that sort of artistic side that I kind of wean out of architecture.
Well, you're definitely artistic. We're going to be looking at your work as we talk today. A little bit of background. Can you give us a little background on your?
Sure. In terms of architecture and art.
And how you got to where you are today.
Well, I think it all began with a frustrated mother and a bored 8-year-old.
Okay.
Long story short, I basically didn't know I could draw until that point. So I had been just kind of hanging around at home during the summer break, and my mom was just so tired of just seeing me do nothing, so she just threw an art book at me and insisted that I drew something. So of course, since she insisted, I didn't do it. But eventually I locked myself in my room, and I did, and of course she accused me of not doing it on my own accord. It was a cheat because it was so good. But other than that, I don't know. My artistic kind of development sort of blossomed from there. And
How did you go from artistic, though, to being into architecture? I mean, you have a degree in that and all that.
Right. I guess you could say, well, you can't make a living as an artist, but that's not the reason why I chose architecture. I think it has more to do with kind of me and the way I discovered architecture, and it was through art. And it was through just on, kind of looking at art books and sort of looking at the masters and realizing that way back when there was no distinction. There were artists, engineers, and architects, and this was all in one person. So I guess they were kind of like the Renaissance person.
So do you say that art influences your architecture, or architecture influences your art?
Oh, good question. I can't say. I think I draw from both.
Okay.
So it could be art influencing a building or some architectural idea that I'm looking at, or vice versa. So it's not essentially me saying, okay, well, here's architecture, here's art, let's see. I'm kind of running out of ideas in architecture. Let's kind of pull some from art and kind of give it
So you tie it in together.
Yeah.
Well, what got you interested in buildings?
Buildings?
Buildings.
Well, my dad was in the business, but again, I can't, essentially attribute that to him directly and only. I guess going back and looking at, the artistic and the theoretical masters, and how, I could see they're kind of like, if you look at something like Cubism, that could be easily translated into architecture. And when I'd look at a building, for me, it would almost seem like a canvas if you were just paying attention to the facade.
Okay.
So superficially, that's how I kind of migrated over to architecture as well. It's like, imagine, going from a 2D world
Right.
where, you're just kind of painting or drawing or whatever, into something that's like a living sculpture, a mechanized sculpture almost.
Well, let's talk about you have a series, Alice, the Alice series.
Right.
What do you have to say about that?
What do I have to say about that?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
No. Well, I think that kind of evolved from the kind of me looking back on my road,
Okay.
and I kind of drew from that. If you'll notice that, Alice in Wonderland, well, obviously that's so fundamental. She's on an exploration. And to me, I think kind of my path has been that way too. It hasn't really been straight. It's been rather meandering, and I get many, why did you do this? Why did you do that? This doesn't add up. But it's might be silly to some, but for me, every kind of step of the way led me to where I was, and kind of weaved everything in my past together.
And now you're working on a PhD, are you not?
Yes, and
So-
that's what brought me out here initially, was a PhD in urban planning.
So is that your goal, or you have more beyond that, or?
I wouldn't say that's exactly my goal. I'm not really the type of person that kind of stops at something and says, this is my goal, because I always find myself going back. And I wouldn't say going back and picking up like architecture, picking up, art.
Right.
It's just something that's there with me, and it's just kind of like in a soup. Like
Okay.
an architect that I admire, Rem Koolhaas, he once described everything, and he was describing the Las Vegas architecture. He's describing it as a soup. And I guess I see my background as a soup.
Okay.
So it's kind of like me adding different ingredients to it.
Now you've been in different cities, Toronto, Las Vegas.
I've been in Toronto, Montreal, Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
I don't know, probably not too many people would know about that, but Las Vegas.
So you've seen
New
a
York.
lot of different architecture, right? Styles.
I have.
mean,
And my first venture into the United States actually was to go to Las Vegas to work and study, because I thought that would be the most perverse thing I could do, and just would upset, whatever, architectural dogma there is out there, because I find that a lot of people like to study Las Vegas and they find it really fascinating, but they want to do it from an academic distance. They
see.
don't want to live there.
Okay.
They don't want to be a Vegas resident, because that would just be so, kind of.
So you were there to do that.
I was there to do that, and it's funny because I went through like so many different like transformations of what I thought about the place. At first, You know, when I visited just for a few days, I was like, this is insane. This is Disneyland. I love it. It's crazy. And then I went back, and to stay in that kind of realization that I'd be in this, you know, for at least a few years just made me hate it, you know. But then I started discovering kind of its history more and sort of off the strip elements. And when I say off the strip, I don't mean like necessarily off the Las Vegas Boulevard Strip, but I'm thinking kind of peeling back the layers and looking at old Las Vegas and appreciating, you know, that sort of architecture for what it was. So I guess you could say I had a Venturi moment.
What inspires you?
What inspires me? I don't know. Anything could inspire me, really. Just, it could be as simple as, you know, just something I see on the street, a material that I like, or, you know, or it could be something extremely complicated. You know, other artists inspire me, other architects inspire me. Writing inspires me, which, you know, I do a bit of writing, and people also find that kind of odd, you know, but it's interesting because when I'm looking at, you know, say, for example, going through an architectural project, for me, in order to clarify that project in my mind, I visualize it, but I find if I can't succinctly write a paragraph about it, or sort of like a premise, that the concept, the you know, the partie of the project just does not show itself to me.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a combination of this writing, of this art, of, you know, it just kind of ties it all together, and then something really clear comes out of the project. And I know I'm successful at doing that when someone says, you know, I see this and this and this, and that usually comes out of that process.
Well, what medium do you work in mostly? And I was talking about your art, of course.
Mostly I do drawings, so it would be like either mostly pencil or charcoal. I've kind of integrated some charcoal to get more of that darker, earthy tone.
Your work is pretty dark.
It is. Yeah. And I think I've always kind of migrated towards that aspect of like personalities and human personalities. I always say that if I didn't have a drawing talent, I would be a psychiatrist.
Okay.
So I guess that sort of makes sense because you know, that kind of element fascinates me, and I find it mostly intellectually rigorous. So there's that academic side of me that kind of is satisfied as well as the artistic.
Okay.
So that's kind of
comes together
in my work.
You have an artist statement online that says you're fascinated with abandoned sites. Why is that?
Just the idea that there's just so many ghosts, not in terms of what we think as, you know, kind of the spooky Halloween kind, but in terms of like the building kind, like and how, you know, there's so many different layers, architectural layers to a building, and how each tells a story. You
know, let's talk about your Don Jail series then. That fits right into that, doesn't it?
That does.
Yeah.
That actually does quite nicely. Good segue.
So.
Well, the Don Jail is an abandoned historic prison, a Victorian prison in Toronto. It's derelict. It's, you know, the city doesn't know what to do with it, although they have some pretty sad concepts that they're thinking of right now, which is going to be too much for me to explain. But you know, growing up in Toronto, we'd always pass by that area, and it's the Don River Parkway. And that jail fascinated me, and I always thought to myself, you know, when I get into architecture school, I want to do something with that, and that's exactly what I did for my thesis. And I wanted to kind of peel back the layers of that prison and turn it into a library and an experiential museum, as well as a halfway house.
Wow.
So, you know, I'm kind of like taking, you know, sort of bringing back what it was in terms of the halfway house, you know, a place of what's, you know, what they thought was supposed healing, you know, that was happening, but it really wasn't, you know, so it's kind of taking a negative and turning it into a positive. And then a museum, but not like a traditional container of objects, just more of something that people can interact with.
Okay.
You know, so they're part of the story, and they're kind of, you know, it was arranged in a way that would, you know, pique someone's curiosity.
Right.
almost in terms of an Alice in Wonderland sort of way. So
Well, I'm glad we got to show some of your work today, but if people don't get a chance to see it all, I mean, we only have a short segment here, they can go to phoenixartspace.com
Definitely.
to check out more of your work. Real quickly, what do you think of the Phoenix art scene, or is there a Phoenix art scene?
I think it would be unfair to say there's no Phoenix art scene. There certainly is.
Right.
And there's a grittiness to it, and I'm not saying gritty in terms of dirty or undeveloped. There's something really honest and kind of basic, and I'm not using, again, basic in a bad way. There's something accessible, I guess that would be a better word for it, about it, that, you know, very polished scenes in New York, which I love, but, you know, don't have. So that is what I appreciate about it. You know, like new talent is welcome here, young
Yes.
talent is welcome here, and there's not that sort of pretension that goes with it. 'Cause
It's
I
still
find
growing, don't you think? It's still sort of...
It's growing,
Yeah.
but in a you know, in my heart of hearts, I hope that it never gets that polished.
Yeah, right.
So
Well, we're certainly happy you're here in the art scene. I don't know how long you'll stay, but we hope.
as long as you'll have me.
Well, we hope we can come back and check in, you know, down the road and see what you're up to.
Definitely. Thank you so
So,
much.
Effie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Wow, Melanie and Effie, two great creative minds we had on the show today. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.
Hey, do you have a comment for us? If so, call us at 480-969-3789. We would love to hear from you. And for more information about our show or to view any past episode, check us out at InsideCreativeMinds.com.